Hi everyone, this is Mindy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am going to be creating 3 cards featuring the Hero Arts June 2019 My Monthly Hero Kit and also some of the add-ons that were available. I absolutely fell in love with the products from the June kit, and I'm going to have more projects and cards to share in the future, but for now, I just stuck to the 3 cards. My first card is going to be featuring the Thanks a Bunch monkeys. These are super, super sweet. I adore these monkeys. It was one of the first add-on stamp sets that I purchased. And I'm just going to start out by coloring up my images. So I'm laying out some of the images that I think I'm going to use. I am stamping on Neenah Solar White cardstock. This is 80 pound. That's my personal preference for Copic coloring. And I'm using the Hero Arts Intense Black ink, which is Copic safe. So I just stamp down my images. I do like to stamp them a couple times just to make sure I have some really good crisp black lines. And then once I have those stamped, I can start doing some coloring. So I decided actually to only use 2 of the monkeys, even though I stamped 3. And I did bring in a couple flowers. I don't think I used the flowers though in the end. I'm starting out coloring my monkeys, and I'm using the colors E27, E25, E23, and E21. And I'm just starting out with my darkest color, which is the E27. I lay out my shadow areas, and then I blend out with the rest of the colors, leaving E21 as my highlighted area. And sometimes I do like to go back in and color the images twice. I just really like to have a lot of depth and definition in my coloring. And like I said, that's all personal preference as well. Then I'm moving on to this other cute little monkey that's going to be hanging down from some vines. And I will be coming in and coloring the face with the E21, and I will bring in E04 as a little shadow area. Then I'll work on coloring that vine. And for the vine, I'm going to use E21. Now I take the E21 and I'm going to lay that color over the entire vine. That's the lightest color that I'll be using. I just thought it was easiest since these are kind of some finer areas to color in. Then I bring in the YG17, which is my darkest, and blend out a little bit with YG25. Next, I can take my coordinating dies and I'm going to arrange them over my images. This is an item you would have to purchase separately if you do like to have the coordinating dies, which I do. And I'm just going to hold them in place with some purple tape, lining up each of the monkeys and also the vine. And I did die cut out the flowers. Then I'm going to bring in my Spellbinders Platinum die cutting machine and I'm going to run these through and die cut them out. Since I had my die cutting machine out, I'm going to go ahead and die cut out the jungle frame. I die cut it twice. This is the jungle frame. It also has an additional rectangle die you can put around that as well, but I'm just using the jungle frame itself, the inside portion or the main portion. So I'm die cutting this with the Hero Hues Premium Cardstock. I am using Palm and Kiwi, so a light and a dark. And I'll die cut those both out, and then I'm just going to take my craft tool and just poke out all the areas that were still stuck in the die and in my cardstock. And I'll just set those off on the side for now. Next, I'm working on what you're going to see looking through those vines on my card, and you'll see it all come together in just a moment. This is just a piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock. I am taking a mini clouds stencil and a blending brush, and I'm using the Splash ink from Hero Arts. This is actually a reactive ink, and I'm just going over those clouds. You can see I shift it each time. Once I ink blend a cloud on there, I shift it. Each edge has kind of a different shape of clouds to it. And I'm just using some really light circular motions, going over that bottom edge of the cloud, working my way up towards the one that was prior, adding a little bit of color to each one. Once I have my panel ink blended, and you can see it has this great cloudy black background to it, Then I'm going to start layering in my die cuts. So what I'll do is I'm taking that light piece of cardstock, I flipped it over so it's going to layer up really nice and show through my card front. And then the darker color, which I believe that one's the palm, I'm going to layer that on top. So to attach these to my clouded background, I'm just using some Gina K Connect glue. This is a really nice liquid glue in a fine tube. It has a fine tip. It is a very strong adhesive. I'm not putting glue over every leaf that's hanging over because I'm going to be tucking in my monkeys. So I just line that up with my card panel, press that down lightly, and then I'll do the same thing to the darker piece of cardstock. Just putting glue around the entire edge and then a little bit on some of the leaves that are showing through there. And I'll layer that on top. And I love the look of this where it's like you're looking through the jungle up into the sky. And then I can bring in my die cut monkeys, and these are just the cutest. And I was thinking afterwards, if you just changed up some colors of these monkeys or even your background, this could work for a really great baby card. I mean, it's totally different than what I'm making, but these monkeys are just so adorable. I think it would work really well for baby cards, baby showers, if you just change up the colors a little bit. So I am adding those with some liquid glue and kind of just tucking those under those leaves so it looks like they're hanging down. And then I can come in, since that is a fine tip glue, I'm going to just add little spots of glue behind some of those bigger leaves that were popping up a little bit. Now I need a sentiment for this. I'm also using the Thanks a Bunch Monkey stamp set for the sentiment. This is the Hero Arts Pitch Black cardstock. And I'm just prepping that with an anti-static powder tool. That way my embossing powder doesn't stick to everywhere on the card, just on my embossing ink. And for this, I am using the embossing and watermark ink from Hero Arts. So I'll ink that up, stamp that down. I'm just giving it a light push. I don't want to squish my stamp. And I'm going to do it one more time just to make sure I have that entire area covered. And I'll bring in the white embossing powder and just sprinkle that over it, tapping off any excess. And then I can melt that with my Wagner heat tool. So once that is nice and melted, I like to take a Swiffer cloth and just brush over my cardstock. That'll just remove any of the excess anti-static powder tool that I had used so it comes through really nice and black. Now for the sentiment, I decided I wanted to have a slanted edge, so I'm just trimming this down into a thin strip. And I'll do the edges as well. I'm just going to do the one edge is going to be flat. And my other image, my other end, I'm going to kind of tilt my cardstock and cut that, and it's going to have a slanted edge to it, just for a little bit of a different look. And I line that up with some foam tape to add a little bit of dimension and add that to the front of my card. That will finish up my first card. My next card is going to be featuring one of the large background stamps from Hero Arts. This was also an add-on. This one is the Jungle Bold Prints. I love background stamps because there's so much that you can do with them, especially when you have open areas on them like this. Now, in order to stamp it, I personally like to use my Misty tool, so I need to remove my black foam mat because this is a red rubber stamp, so it already has foam on it, and I'm using a piece of Canson watercolor cardstock. I do have that cut to 6x6. I always like to start bigger because then I can trim it down to whatever size I want versus starting out like a 4 1/4 by 5.5. So I'm prepping that entire piece with my anti-static powder tool and then using the embossing ink, I'm going to ink up that entire stamp set and stamp it down. Another bonus to using the Misty or another stamping platform is you can stamp it twice and it'll line up perfectly. You just got to make sure that your cardstock is lined up flush in the corner. So once again, sprinkling on the white embossing powder. And then you do want to make sure your heat tool is nice and hot when you come to the cardstock so you don't overheat your embossing powder. So I did have my heat tool warming up for a little while. And then I can come in and melt that entire background. Once that's cooled down, I'm going to take this panel and I'm going to attach it to just a cutting board that I have. I'm using just some blue painter's tape to hold that in place, and I'm spritzing the entire background with some water. Then I'll bring in some shimmer powder. This is just beautiful powder to add some color to your image. Uh, I'm using Atlantis Burst and Falling Leaves. The Falling Leaves shimmer powder is this first one here that I used. It's a really light green, and the Atlantis Burst has more of a bluish green to it. So you just want to tap that on. You don't want to squirt the bottle because you're going to have powder everywhere. So just light taps all over that background. And then I'm coming in and spritzing that again. Now I am holding up a piece of paper because it does kind of overspray a little bit. So I'm protecting my area and anything I have past that with that piece of paper. And just look at all of that gorgeous color. Now, because we do have embossing on there, it does get stuck in those areas, which is what I wanted. So I'm just taking a paintbrush and kind of moving those colors around a little bit. I want to keep some darker in some areas and some can be light. That'll just add some nice contrast and interest to your background. And I'm taking a paper towel and just kind of dabbing up some of the areas that were a little oversaturated with the water. And when you dab it up with the paper towel, you do kind of remove that color a little bit. So I am bringing back in some of that shimmer powder again, adding a little bit more of the color, and then I'll give that another spritz of water. And now typically the reason I'm using a cutting board is I like to pick my board up once in a while, kind of move the color around. It's a little harder to do when the background is embossed because it does kind of stick in those areas. So that's where having a paintbrush is really nice to kind of help move that along. So once I kind of have dabbed up that water, I am going to set it off on the side to dry for quite a while. You could use your heat tool to speed that drying process up, but I didn't want to risk over melting my embossing powder. So I just let that sit for a little while. And once that was dry, I'm going to trim this panel down. And I'm actually trimming it to I think I have it 5.5, and then I think I did 3 3/4. It's going to leave a white edge on each side, is what I wanted. So kind of figuring out this card, I do have some images that I stamped and colored. Those images are from the Hero Arts June monthly kit, and I die cut those out. This is such a fantastic value. I love these kits. I love these add-ons. You get so much in them. I didn't even get to use them all just yet in this video. So I'm adding those to my background with some liquid glue, just kind of holding down for an extra couple seconds because our background is kind of textured with that embossing powder. So once I have that front panel done, I can just trim off any of the overhang. And I wanted to add a little bit of dimension, so I'm taking some craft foam that I cut to the same size as that watercolor panel. I'm adding double-sided tape to both sides of this craft foam. And then once I remove the backing on just one side at first, I can add my front panel to that. And then I can remove the backing and add this straight to my white note card that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I did go ahead off screen and stamp and heat emboss a sentiment. That is also from the June kit that I just heat embossed with white embossing powder on the Hero Arts Pitch Black cardstock. Now for the sentiment, I'm just going to add that to the front of my card front with some of that double-sided tape. I thought I had enough dimension on there with the craft foam. So just adding that right to the center of my card. And that double-sided tape will hold down real nice. So that is our second card. Using that shimmer powder to create kind of that contrasting background watercolor look. And for my next card, we're going to get really bright here. I love using the Reactive Inks. They are just such vibrant colors. And I really fell in love with this jungle frame. So I'm going to start off by doing a bunch of ink blending. Now I do speed this process up because I did do a lot of ink blending here. And I'm just using a piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock. This is 80 pound. And I'm starting off with Lemon Drop ink. I'm adding that to one end of my cardstock. And then I'm coming in with Fruit Punch. And I'm really putting this on heavy. I'm blending that into that lemon drop. And to do the ink blending, I am using just the mini round blending tools. When I want to apply a lot of ink to an area, I like to use the sponge tools just because it does hold quite a bit of ink, and I'm not worried about any lines from the sponge because it's going to cover the entire panel. Then I come back in with that lemon drop, and I'm just kind of trying to soften the blend between the two colors. I'm also going to bring in Berry Smoothie, and using a jumbo sponge dauber, I'm going to add some color to the top. I do flip around a lot between my ink blending tools just because whatever is handy, whatever is clean, especially when I'm going through so many colors. It's just kind of whatever is clean and within reach is kind of what I grab. So once I have that berry smoothie down, I do go back over the areas. I wasn't quite happy with the blend between the fruit punch and the lemon drop, so I brought in a little bit of the creamsicle. And once these ink colors dry, they do dry back a little bit and the blend does become softer. So you won't see such a harsh difference there. Now I do have an oops in this video, which I thought I would leave because I get a kick out of it. I laughed at myself, so I wanted to show you. I'm stamping a sentiment and I wanted this to be in the middle of the card. This is the black ink that comes in the kit. And so I'm stamping that in the middle. Now what you want to make sure you do is have your card flush in the edges of the MISTI if you're going to be stamping twice. I did not. And it didn't stamp right. So I need to fix that. I loved the background. I didn't want to redo it. So to fix this, I actually stamped that same sentiment on black cardstock and heat embossed with the white embossing powder. And I just placed it right over that. So even though you have mess ups, I just, there's ways to fix them sometimes before throwing in the towel. And then I added this cute little toucan. This is from the June kit that I added to the card. I hope you enjoyed my cards today and taking a look at some of the things you can do with the Hero Arts My Monthly June 2019 kit. If you did enjoy it, I would really appreciate a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so and would like to see more videos from me. Be sure to also click the notification bell so you're notified of when new videos are posted. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.